Captain Jake Mitchell was making his routine inspection of Station Omega-7's waste disposal sector when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it over the hum of machinery. A whimper. Weak, desperate, barely alive. He followed the sound to Compactor Unit 12, where the station dumped organic waste before ejection into space. The smell hit him first, rotting food and chemicals mixing in the recycled air. Then he saw her. A tiny ball of fur, no bigger than his hand, lying among the trash. Golden markings traced down her spine, glowing even under the harsh fluorescent lights. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He knew those markings. Everyone in the galaxy knew those markings. This was a Tharnian royal cub. The kitten's chest barely moved. Her eyes were closed and her small body shook with each labored breath. Jake didn't think. He just reached in and scooped her up, tucking her inside his flight jacket against his chest. She was so cold, like holding ice. Her tiny heart fluttered against his palm like a dying bird. Why would anyone throw away a royal? Jake whispered, already moving toward the exit. His mind raced with questions. Tharnians were the warrior elite of the known galaxy. Their empire spanned 40 star systems. Their royal family was treated like gods. And yet here was one of their cubs, left to die in garbage. Station Master Vorith intercepted him in the corridor. The massive insectoid loomed over Jake, his compound eyes reflecting light in 1,000 directions. His mandibles clicked together in that distinctive sound that always meant disapproval. Captain Mitchell, what have you taken from the disposal unit? Jake pulled his jacket tighter around the kitten. Found a Tharnian cub. She's still alive. Barely. Vorith's antennae twitched. Other station personnel stopped to watch, creating a small crowd. A Krellian merchant, a pair of Vexen traders, even old Roger from engineering. They all wore the same expression. Pity mixed with resignation. The Tharnian delegation was here yesterday, Vorith explained, his translator turning his clicks into standard speech. The Empress herself attended. She brought 3 cubs for the bonding ceremony. That one. He gestured at the lump in Jake's jacket, was deemed defective. Too small. Weak bone structure. The Empress ordered it disposed of according to their traditions. Traditions. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. You mean they just threw her away? She's a baby. A Vexen trader stepped forward, her scales shimmering blue in concern. The Tharnians do not accept weakness in their royal line. Defective cubs are eliminated. It is their way. It has always been their way. That one will not survive the night anyway, Vorith added, not unkindly. Without the mother's specialized milk, Tharnian cubs die within hours. Their biology requires specific enzymes. The medical database is clear on this. I am sorry, Captain, but you cannot save her. Jake looked down at the kitten. She had opened her eyes just a crack. They were the palest gold he had ever seen, like sunlight through honey. She made that whimpering sound again, so small and scared. Something in his chest tightened. No species should interfere with Tharnian traditions, Vorith said firmly. It could create diplomatic incidents. It could. I don't care, Jake interrupted. He met the station master's many-eyed gaze without flinching. I'm taking her to my quarters. The crowd murmured. Roger shook his head sadly. The Vexen trader touched Jake's arm gently. Your compassion honors you, human. But you will only prolong her suffering. Jake ignored them all. He walked through the station's corridors, past the markets and docking bays, past the recreational areas where aliens of a dozen species gathered. Some stared. Some whispered. No one tried to stop him. They all thought the same thing. The human was wasting his time. The cub would be dead by morning. His quarters were small but comfortable. Jake laid the kitten on his bunk and wrapped her in every heated blanket he owned. She was so tiny she almost disappeared in the fabric. He cranked up the temperature controls until sweat beaded on his forehead, but the kitten still shivered. Jake pulled up his terminal and began searching the medical databases. Tharnian biology. Nutritional requirements. Enzyme compositions. The information was limited. Most species didn't study Tharnian cubs because most species never got close to one. But Jake read everything he could find. He cross-referenced protein structures. He compared their digestive enzymes to Earth felines. He calculated molecular weights and binding affinities. The databases were right. Tharnian cubs needed their mother's milk. The enzyme blend was unique, specifically designed to help their systems process the heavy metals their adult bodies would eventually need. Without it, they couldn't absorb nutrients. They starved from the inside out. But Jake noticed something else in the data. The enzymes weren't that different from certain proteins found in Earth mammals. Close enough that maybe, just maybe, he could synthesize something similar using the station's medical supplies and his own knowledge of biochemistry. He worked through the night. His coffee went cold 3 times. His eyes burned from staring at the screen. The kitten's breathing grew shallower. Twice he checked to make sure she was still alive, his hand hovering over her tiny ribs to feel them rise and fall. By dawn, Jake had something. A synthetic formula mixing station nutrients with modified proteins and a stabilizing agent he borrowed from the hydroponics bay. It was crude. It probably broke a dozen medical regulations. But it might work. He filled a small medical dropper and carefully lifted the kitten's head. She was so weak she could barely open her mouth. Jake squeezed a single drop onto her tongue. She didn't react. He tried again. Another drop. Then another. On the 4th drop she swallowed. Her tiny pink tongue moved. Jake felt hope surge through him. He kept going, slow and patient, letting her take the formula at her own pace. After 10 minutes she had consumed maybe a tablespoon. But her breathing seemed stronger. The shivering slowed. Jake set down the dropper and gently stroked her head with one finger. She was warm now, finally warm. And then she did something that made Jake's throat tighten with emotion. She purred. Just a little vibration, weak and uncertain, but definitely a purr. "That's it, girl," Jake whispered, smiling for the first time in hours. "That's my girl. You're going to make it." He looked at her golden markings, at her pale eyes watching him with something like trust. She needed a name. Something strong. Something that matched the fire he saw in her, even through the weakness. "Nova," he said softly. "Your name is Nova. And we're going to show this whole galaxy what a defect can really do." The kitten purred again, stronger this time, and closed her eyes to sleep. Jake stayed beside her, his hand resting on her small back, feeling each breath. Outside his quarters, the station continued its normal operations. Ships docked and departed. Aliens conducted their business. And somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, the Tharnian Empire went on, never knowing that the cub they had discarded would one day change everything. 6 months changed everything. Nova went from a dying kitten that fit in Jake's palm to a growing adolescent who knocked over furniture when she got excited. Every morning, Jake watched her become stronger, faster, more confident. But the way he raised her made every alien on Station Omega-7 shake their heads in confusion. Traditional Tharnian cubs were thrown into combat pits at 8 weeks old. They learned through pain, through survival, through watching their siblings fight for dominance. The weak ones died. The strong ones carried scars before they could even speak. That was the Tharnian way. That was how you built warriors. Jake had a different idea. He started with simple games. A rubber ball rolled across his quarters and Nova's instincts kicked in immediately. She pounced, her small body coiling and releasing like a spring. Jake clapped and gave her a treat. Then he did it again. And again. To Nova it was fun. To Jake it was teaching her to track moving targets, to calculate trajectories, to strike with precision. Within weeks he built obstacle courses in the cargo bay during his off hours. Boxes stacked at different heights. Ropes hanging from the ceiling. Narrow beams to test balance. Nova flew through them, her natural agility enhanced by the challenges Jake created. Other station workers would stop and watch, fascinated despite themselves. "You're making her soft," Station Master Vorith said one day, watching Nova navigate a particularly complex course. "Tharnians are bred for war, not playtime." Jake tossed another ball, and Nova snatched it from midair without breaking stride through the obstacle course. "Am I?" he asked. "Look at her movement. She's faster than any Tharnian cub I've seen in the database files. More controlled too." Vorith's mandibles clicked skeptically. "Speed without aggression is useless. She needs to be vicious, ruthless. That is the Tharnian way." Jake just shrugged and continued his training. He wasn't interested in the Tharnian way. He taught Nova to solve puzzles for her food. Simple at first, just pushing a lever or opening a latch. Then more complex mechanical puzzles that required multiple steps. Jake watched her frustration turn to determination, watched her try different approaches until she succeeded. She was learning to think, not just react. Hand signals came next. Sit, stay, come, move left, move right, climb, hide. Nova picked them up faster than Jake expected. Within 3 months, he could direct her through complex sequences without saying a word. Stealth became their specialty. Jake would send Nova into the ventilation shafts, guiding her through the station's maze of ducts with just gestures. She learned to move silently, her padded feet making no sound even on metal. But Jake's most controversial teaching method involved earth. He spent hours showing Nova videos from his homeworld. Wolves cooperating to bring down prey twice their size. Lions using tall grass for cover. Cheetahs using pure speed to catch animals that zigzagged and dodged. And humans, always humans, using tools, setting traps, thinking 3 steps ahead of their targets. Why do you show her Earth animals? Roger from engineering asked one day. She's not from Earth. Because Earth predators learn to survive without being the biggest or strongest, Jake explained. They adapted. They got creative. That's what Nova needs to learn. Nova absorbed everything with an intelligence that genuinely shocked Jake. She didn't just memorize what she saw. She combined things. She took the pack hunting tactics of wolves and mixed them with the stealth of big cats. She watched humans use leverage and tools, then figured out how to apply those concepts with her own claws and strength. At full growth, Nova stood 6 feet tall. Compared to other Tharnians who averaged 8 to 9 feet, she looked small. Delicate even. Where they were bulky with heavy muscle, she was lean and streamlined. Station visitors who knew Tharnians would see her and assume she was weak. They were always wrong. Her golden eyes could track movements the station's security sensors missed. Jake tested her once, having Roger try to sneak up on them in a crowded corridor. Nova spotted him from 60 feet away, moving through a crowd of aliens. Her awareness was incredible. The incident with the cargo hauler proved just how well Jake's training worked. Jake was walking back to his quarters late one night, tired from a double shift. The corridor was empty except for one Bralex hauler, stumbling drunk and looking for trouble. The alien was huge, maybe 7 feet of thick hide and bad attitude. He stepped in front of Jake, blocking his path. Human, the Bralex slurred. Think you're special? Taking Tharnian cubs? Making fools of proper warriors? He raised a fist the size of Jake's head. Jake didn't even have time to react. Nova appeared from nowhere, dropping from a ventilation grate above. She hit the Bralex from behind, her weight and momentum driving him face-first into the floor. Before he could recover, she had him pinned, one paw on his back, claws positioned precisely at the base of his skull. Not cutting, just touching. A promise of what could happen. Her growl was low and controlled. Not wild rage. Calculated threat. The Bralex went completely still, alcohol-fueled bravery evaporating instantly. Please, he whimpered. Please don't. Nova, release, Jake said calmly. Nova stepped back immediately, letting the hauler scramble to his feet and run down the corridor without looking back. Jake scratched behind Nova's ears, right in the spot she loved. Good girl. Always protect, never kill unless absolutely necessary. You understand? Nova rumbled deep in her chest, a sound of contentment and understanding. She pressed her head against Jake's hand and he smiled. She was becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. A Tharnian warrior raised on human values. Trained not just to fight but to think. Not just to kill but to show restraint. Not just to survive but to protect. And the galaxy was about to find out just how dangerous that combination could be. Jake was running diagnostics on the station's life support systems when the priority transmission alert sounded. He almost ignored it. Priority alerts were usually just merchants trying to sound important or station bureaucracy demanding attention. But something made him check the origin code. Tharnian Imperial Channel. Direct from the homeworld. His stomach dropped. He accepted the transmission, and his small screen was suddenly filled with the largest, most intimidating Tharnian he had ever seen. Empress Kira. Even through the digital display, her presence was overwhelming. She was massive, easily 9 feet tall, with golden fur that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Ceremonial armor covered her chest, marked with symbols of her royal bloodline. But it was her eyes that caught Jake. Amber eyes, cold and furious, burning with barely contained rage. Human, she said, her voice deep and dangerous. You harbor stolen property. The defective cub marked for death belongs to the Tharnian Empire. Return her immediately for execution, or face galactic prosecution. Jake's jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. His hands curled into fists at his sides. She has a name. Nova. And she's not property. She's a living being. The Empress's ears flattened against her skull, a sign of extreme aggression. You dare speak to me with such disrespect? You dare keep what belongs to the throne? I will. The transmission flickered as Nova walked into view. She had heard the commotion from the other room. For a long moment that felt like an eternity, mother and daughter stared at each other across the light years of space. Nova's expression was calm, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. Kira's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, disbelief, and then pure hatred. Impossible, Kira breathed. That run should be dead. I threw you away myself. Watched them seal the compactor. Nova sat down beside Jake, her posture calm but every muscle ready. Her voice was steady when she spoke. I am alive because of him. Because he saw value where you saw only shame. Jake saw something flicker across the Empress's face. Was it guilt? Regret? It vanished in an instant, replaced by cold determination. You are an insult to the bloodline. A weakness that should have been erased. The transmission ended abruptly. Jake let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Nova leaned against his leg and he rested his hand on her shoulder. Well, he said quietly. That could have gone better. What followed was 2 weeks of political nightmare. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Tharnian ambassador presented historical precedent, genetic charts and cultural documentation, all proving that discarded royal cubs belonged to the Empire. They had the right to reclaim them. The human delegation tried to argue. They cited rescue laws, sentient rights, and humanitarian exemptions. It didn't matter. The council voted 8-3 in favor of the Tharnian Empire. Species sovereignty won. Cultural traditions won. Nova was to be returned for execution. Station Master Vorith delivered the news personally. I am sorry, Captain Mitchell. The decision is final. The enforcers arrive tomorrow. Jake didn't sleep that night. He stayed up making plans, checking station layouts, calculating odds. Nova sat beside him, understanding that something bad was coming. We could run, she said softly. Take a ship. Disappear into the outer systems. Jake shook his head. They'd hunt us forever. And I won't spend your life running. The enforcers arrived exactly on schedule. 12 Tharnian royal guards, each one massive and heavily armed, marched through the station's main corridor. They wore ceremonial armor that doubled as combat gear. Station personnel scattered, not wanting to be anywhere near what was about to happen. The lead guard stopped outside Jake's quarters. Captain Mitchell. Surrender the defective cub. This is your only warning. Jake stepped out to face them and Nova was right behind him. Her name is Nova. And no. The guards didn't waste time talking. They moved to grab her, expecting an easy capture. They were trained warriors after all, and she was just one small Tharnian raised by a human. What could she possibly do? They learned the answer in 3 seconds. Nova moved like water, like smoke, like nothing they had ever encountered. The station's tight corridors became her advantage. The guards were too big, too bulky for the space. Nova flowed around them. The first guard reached for her and she grabbed his arm, twisted, and used a human joint lock Jake had taught her. The guard's weapon clattered to the floor. She kicked it away and was already moving to the next target. The second guard tried to corner her against a wall. Nova went up instead of back, her claws finding purchase on the ceiling panels. She dropped behind him, struck the pressure point at the base of his neck, and he collapsed unconscious. 4 guards down in 10 seconds. The remaining 8 regrouped, forming a tighter formation. Nova didn't attack again. She just stood there beside Jake, breathing calmly, showing them what they were up against. These were elite royal guards, the best warriors in the Tharnian military. And a 6-foot defective raised by a human had just made them look like amateurs. The guards retreated. Not fled. Retreated. Tactical withdrawal. But everyone watching knew what it really meant. 3 days later, another transmission. Empress Kira's face filled the screen again, but this time her expression was different. Calculated. Dangerous in a new way. Trial by combat, she said simply. Imperial Arena. Your abomination against my champion, Victor Kane. 1 month to prepare. If she loses, you both die. If she wins. Kira paused, her fangs showing in something that wasn't quite a smile. We shall see if a miracle occurs twice. The transmission ended. The challenge was issued. There was no refusing. To refuse was to admit defeat, and the council would send an entire fleet to retrieve Nova by force. Jake looked at Nova. She looked back at him. Her golden eyes showed no fear. Only determination. All right then, Jake said, rolling up his sleeves. Time to really train. We've got 1 month to get you ready to face the most dangerous fighter in the Tharnian Empire. Nova's tail swished once. Then let's get started. The Imperial Arena was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. 500,000 Tharnians packed the massive Colosseum, their roars shaking the very ground beneath his feet. The sound was overwhelming, a physical force that pressed against his chest. They weren't cheering. They were baying for blood. They wanted to see the defective cub torn apart. They wanted to see the human who dared challenge their traditions watch his companion die. Jake stood in the preparation chamber with Nova, his hands checking her lightweight armor one last time. The armor was minimal, just reinforced plating over vital areas. Tharnian combat tradition demanded mobility over protection. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the chest plate. 1 month of intense training had prepared them as much as possible, but now, facing the reality of what was about to happen, doubt crept in. "Remember everything we practiced," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his gut. "Victor Kane is bigger than you. Stronger. More experienced. He's undefeated in 73 fights. But you have advantages he doesn't understand. You're faster. You're smarter. Use the environment. Those pillars in the arena aren't just decoration. Use them for cover. Tire him out. Make him angry. Angry fighters make mistakes. Sloppy mistakes." Nova touched her forehead to his, their ritual before every sparring session for the past year. The gesture calmed them both. "I understand, Jake. I won't let you down." "You could never let me down," Jake said quietly. "No matter what happens out there, you've already proven them all wrong. You're the strongest person I know." The massive gates began to grind open, ancient mechanisms moving tons of metal. Sunlight poured into the chamber, blinding after the darkness. The crowd's roar intensified, becoming almost unbearable. Nova straightened, lifted her head high, and walked toward that light. Jake watched her go, his heart hammering in his chest. He couldn't follow her into the arena. This fight she had to face alone. The arena floor was sand, golden and gleaming under the twin suns of the Tharnian homeworld. Pillars rose at intervals across the fighting ground, remnants of some ancient architectural style. And in the center, waiting with absolute stillness, stood Victor Kane. He was a nightmare made flesh. 9 feet of pure muscle and scar tissue, his dark fur marked with the white lines of 100 battles. His armor was minimal, just like Nova's, but his body itself was a weapon. Claws like curved daggers. Fangs that could crush bone. And eyes that held no mercy, no doubt, only cold certainty of victory. The crowd fell into a ritualistic chant. Ancient words in Old Tharnian calling for blood and honor. Empress Kira sat in the royal box, flanked by her court. Her face showed nothing. No emotion. Just cold observation. The battle horn sounded. A single deep note that cut through the chanting. Victor Kane charged. He moved like a freight train, impossibly fast for something so massive. His claws extended, aiming for a killing strike to Nova's throat. The crowd screamed in anticipation of the quick kill they expected. Nova wasn't there. She rolled sideways at the last possible second, so close that Victor's claws cut through the air where her neck had been a heartbeat before. As she moved, her own claws raked across his ribs. Not deep. Just enough to draw blood. Just enough to sting. Victor roared and spun, but Nova was already moving. She put a pillar between them, using it exactly as Jake had taught her. "Too slow," she called out in perfect Tharnian, her accent flawless. Jake had spent hours teaching her the language, including how to insult properly. Psychological warfare was just as important as physical combat. The taunt worked. Victor's ears flattened in rage. He charged again, even faster. Nova led him on a chase through the pillars, making him turn, making him waste energy. Every time he got close, she was gone, appearing somewhere else, landing another light strike. Nothing serious. Just enough to frustrate him. The crowd's bloodlust began to shift to confusion. This wasn't how fights were supposed to go. Champions didn't get toyed with. Defective runts didn't dance circles around elite warriors. For 20 minutes, Nova made Victor Kane look foolish. She dodged attacks that should have been impossible to dodge. She countered with techniques that made no sense to the watching Tharnians. A low sweep that took his legs out from under him, human wrestling. A feint that made him overcommit, wolfpack tactics. A strike pattern that came from 3 angles simultaneously, big cat hunting strategy. Jake watched from the preparation tunnel, his hands gripping the bars so hard his knuckles turned white. He recognized every move. Every technique was something they had practiced together. She was executing the plan perfectly. Victor was tiring. His charges became less explosive. His reactions slowed by fractions of seconds. And his rage grew, making him sloppy just like Jake predicted. The crowd had gone completely silent now, watching in disbelief as the impossible unfolded before them. Finally, Victor lunged with everything he had left. A desperation attack, putting all his remaining strength into one final strike. It was exactly what Nova had been waiting for. She sidestepped at the last instant, grabbed his extended arm with both hands, and used his own momentum against him. Human judo combined with feline strength. Victor flipped through the air and crashed onto his back, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Nova was on him instantly. Knee on his throat. Claws hovering directly over his eyes. One thrust and it would be over. The killing position. The champion was defeated. The entire arena held its breath. 500,000 Tharnians waiting for the traditional ending. The kill. Honor demanded it. Tradition demanded it. Victor's eyes showed no fear, only acceptance. This was how warriors died. Nova withdrew her claws. She stood up and stepped back, releasing him. Then she turned to the royal box and bowed low, a gesture of respect. "I claim victory through mercy," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent arena. "This is the human way. Strength is not just knowing how to kill. It is knowing when not to." The silence shattered. Half the crowd erupted in roars of approval, impressed despite themselves. The other half screamed for tradition, outraged at the broken custom. The arena descended into chaos. Empress Kira stood slowly. Every eye turned to her. The crowd fell silent again, waiting for her judgment. She looked at Nova for a long moment. Then she looked at Victor Kane, who was slowly getting to his feet, alive because of mercy he never expected. Finally, she inclined her head in the smallest of nods. Victory acknowledged, the Empress declared. Jake's legs nearly gave out in relief. Nova had won. They had both survived. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. Nova stood in the royal chamber, facing Empress Kira one final time. The fight was over. The crowd had dispersed. Now it was just the two of them, mother and daughter, separated by years of pain and choices that couldn't be undone. "You have proven yourself worthy," Kira said, her voice formal and controlled. "I offer you a place in the royal court. You would be reinstated to the bloodline. Given lands, titles, warriors to command. Everything that was denied to you." She paused and something flickered in her amber eyes. "Everything I took from you." Nova looked at the Empress, this powerful figure who had thrown her away as trash. She felt no hatred. Only sadness for what could have been. "I appreciate the offer, but my answer is no." Kira's ears twitched in surprise. "No? You would refuse the throne?" "My place is with Jake," Nova said simply. "He saved me when I was dying. He raised me when no one else would. He taught me that strength isn't just about winning fights. It's about choosing what's right even when it's hard. I won't leave him." The Empress opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. What could she say? Nova had won the trial by combat. She had the right to choose her own path. "Then go," Kira said quietly. "But know that you will always be welcome here should you change your mind." Nova bowed respectfully and walked away from the throne, from the power, from everything the royal bloodline represented. She walked toward the landing bay where Jake waited by their shuttle, and she never looked back. They left the homeworld together that same day. Jake piloted their small ship away from the planet, and Nova watched it shrink in the viewport. "Any regrets?" Jake asked. "Not a single one," Nova answered. But the arena fight had changed everything. The footage spread across the galactic network within hours. Every species saw it. A discarded Tharnian cub defeating the greatest champion through tactics no one had seen before. Winning through mercy instead of killing. Fascinated people. It inspired them. It made them question things they had accepted their entire lives. Within 3 weeks, the first young Tharnian showed up at their ship. His name was Cole and he was barely a year old. Too gentle for warrior training, his family had called him. They wanted him gone. Jake looked at the trembling cub and saw Nova years ago. "Come on in," he said. "We'll teach you." Then came Lisa, rejected for being too curious. Then Danny, too empathetic. Then Amy, too small. One by one, the cubs deemed too different, too wrong, too defective found their way to Jake and Nova. Each one had the same story. The Tharnian culture had no place for them. But Jake and Nova did. Their small ship became a floating training center. Jake taught them everything he had taught Nova. Problem solving. Strategy. Restraint. The value of thinking before fighting. Nova taught them Tharnian combat skills mixed with human techniques. Together they created something new. Warriors who protected instead of destroyed. Their growing team needed work, so they started taking contracts. Security jobs mostly. Escort missions. Conflict resolution. Their reputation spread like wildfire through the galactic communities. Nova became known as the Shadow Empress, and the stories about her grew with each job. On the Krellian border, she stopped an entire war fleet from invading a peaceful colony. Not through firepower but through strategy. She infiltrated the flagship, accessed their communications, and proved to the fleet commander that his superiors had lied about the colony's resources. The war ended before it began. In the Outer Rim, she tracked down the notorious pirate queen Rachel Cross, who had terrorized shipping lanes for 5 years. Everyone expected a violent confrontation. Instead, Nova talked to her, listened to her story, learned that Rachel had turned to piracy after her family was killed by a corrupt corporation. Nova helped her get justice through legal channels instead of revenge. Rachel disbanded her crew and became an advocate for shipping safety reform. On the colony world of New Haven, 3 different species were on the brink of war over water rights. Diplomats had failed. Military forces were mobilizing. Nova spent 2 weeks living with each group, learning their needs and fears. She found a solution everyone had missed: an underground aquifer that could supply all 3 colonies if they worked together to access it. Peace came through understanding, not conquest. Every contract followed the same pattern: minimum force, maximum mercy. Find the real problem and fix it. The jobs that would have ended in bloodshed instead ended in handshakes. And always Jake was beside her, planning, advising, supporting. The human and the Tharnian, partners in everything. Years passed. Their team grew to 20 Tharnians, all trained in the human way. They operated from a larger ship now, a converted cargo hauler that Jake had modified into living quarters and training facilities. One evening, Jake stood in the cargo bay watching Nova train the youngest cubs. They moved through obstacle courses he had built, solving the same puzzles he had created for Nova so long ago. Learning that true strength meant protecting, not destroying. Nova caught his eye across the room and smiled. It was a very human expression on a feline face, something only she did. Later, when the cubs were asleep, Nova curled up beside Jake's command chair. The ship was on autopilot, stars streaking past the viewport in brilliant lines. "Thank you," she said softly. Jake looked at her, confused. "For what?" "For seeing what I could become. When everyone else saw trash, you saw potential." Jake scratched behind her ears, the gesture automatic after all these years together. "You were always going to be extraordinary, Nova. I just gave you the chance to show it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the galaxy pass by. Out there, across hundreds of worlds, things were changing. Young beings from dozens of species were questioning traditions, asking why things had to be the way they always were, wondering what potential their cultures had overlooked in the pursuit of strength or purity or tradition. And at the center of it all was a man who had refused to let a kitten die in a trash compactor. A man who believed compassion was strength, not weakness. And the fearsome legend that kitten became. The Shadow Empress and her human. Proof that compassion could be the greatest strength of all.